It's true. Across the globe, women aren't as prosperous as men. Gender inequality is a pressing moral issue, but we forget it has massive economic implications. If you were to put all of the women who don't have access to formal financial services in one place, they would make up the third largest country in the world. That means an entire population without bank accounts, credit cards, or other tools you and I likely benefit from daily. Prosperity for women starts with inclusive policies, products, and people around the globe, and the investment to make it happen. Welcome to the Making Finance Work for Women podcast. My name is Sonia Kelly, and I lead Women's World Banking's proprietary research division. Join me as I speak with changemakers around the globe to deconstruct the social and economic exclusion women face. We'll discover new evidence together and drive action to accelerate women's economic empowerment. Because a leg up isn't a handout, it's a global game changer. Indeed, welcome and thank you so much for tuning into the Making Finance Work for Women podcast, streaming on YouTube and available wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on YouTube, you'll be able to find additional insights and resources linked in the description of the video below. I'm the host of the show, Sonia Kelly, and I'm also the global head of the Women's World Banking Institute. Before we get started today, I'd like to give a special shout out to the sponsor of the Making Finance Work for Women podcast, Ernst & Young LLP. EY is a global leader working across assurance, consulting, law, strategy, tax, and transactions. EY teams ask better questions to find new answers for the complex issues facing our world today. You can visit their website at ey.com to explore their latest insights and services. Let's jump into the show. Today, we're talking about digital assets with insights coming from the fast-moving stablecoin space. But we aren't only going to talk about the mechanics of blockchain or how cool smart contract technology is, which actually we've covered on the podcast before. Instead, we're going to focus our conversation on the social impact potential of digital assets and how to translate that potential into real value for those who are least likely to be connected to or using financial services. So you always know I like to start with the numbers, and here are the numbers on digital assets. The global digital assets market is projected to reach $113 billion in revenue by the end of this year, with nearly 1 billion users worldwide. That means if you're not yet using digital assets, you definitely know somebody who is. We also know that stablecoin capitalization surpassed $300 billion last year in 2025, growing nearly 50% year on year, and not just playing in crypto native ecosystems anymore. And also another figure for you, on-chain real-world assets tripled in 2025 to reach $18.7 billion, signaling the early stages of scaled institutional use. I would guess that if you have services with a financial institution, which everybody listening, let's be honest, probably has, your financial institution is working on this. Like, this is something that is driving the future of finance. We saw last year as well that the U.S. Genius Act established in the U.S. the first federal stablecoin framework. And that was accompanied by also a global wave of regulatory alignment from Hong Kong and the EU to Singapore and the UAE. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. In 2025, we also saw a number of really exciting IPOs, public offerings, including Circle and Figure. So I can say with confidence that stablecoin is moving from a cool idea to widespread financial sector infrastructure. Now, what does this mean for low-income women and their families around the world? Here are a few use cases I can think of. So let's look at the use case of a migrant worker, let's say in Indonesia. Maybe she traveled from Cambodia to Indonesia to work for a wealthy family and wants to send money home. She might use stablecoin to send the money, and she might, by doing that, avoid nearly all remittances fees, saving both her and her family high costs. And I know that remittances are expensive. I think there are some figures that say remittances are still some like 8% of the transaction value. We can also look at other use cases, like an entrepreneur, for example, who has a small shop in Rwanda with tight margins and wants to reduce the credit card transaction fee that she pays on customer payments that are coming in. So maybe she starts accepting alternative currency like stablecoin and can therefore increase her profit margins. Or maybe there's a woman in India, and this is a use case we've talked about before on the podcast, woman in India in her 20s who just entered the workforce and wants to start saving. And she knows that her mother started saving in her 20s as well by buying gold jewelry. But to her, this feels kind of old school. So instead, she opens a crypto wallet and starts putting her money there to put a little bit aside. So, with those use cases in mind, I'd love to turn to our guest, who's an executive working to ensure new payment instruments work for everyone. Please allow me to introduce Elisabeth Carpenter, Chief Strategic Engagement Officer from Circle. Now, after 9 years of serving as Circle's COO, Elisabeth has turned her attention to accelerating and giving permanence to the broader mission to raise global economic prosperity. She now forges relationships with critical commercial, nonprofit, and NGOs to drive Circle's mission through stablecoin network growth and adoption worldwide. Welcome, Elisabeth.
Hello, hello. Lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. Now, I always like to start our episodes by asking what your origin story is. And regardless of how young you are, since stablecoin is so new, there's no way you started your career in this space. So tell me, how did you get here?
Well, you are definitely right. Nobody grows up thinking they're going to work on stablecoins, and that is definitely not what happened with me. So you are correct. So I am from pretty firm immigrant stock, which means, when you're raised in that kind of environment with grandparents and parents around who came from not very much into this country, you grow up understanding the dignity of hard work and really how fragile economic security can be. Often it's economic security is the reason people move from wherever they were born. And so that notion of just fragile economic security is just something that I kind of grew up with. And and as such, my parents really instilled this very deep belief that if you have the ability to create opportunity for others, you should, because they benefited so much from opportunities that were given to them by people who cared. So in every single role I've had, no matter what the industry was, I've always asked myself essentially the same question, which is, how does this job, how does this technology, how does this business raise prosperity? And does it expand access in any way? So what drew me to Circle over a decade ago wasn't really crypto hype. I was certainly far from it. It was actually the mission is what drew me to Circle. Our mission is to raise global economic prosperity through the frictionless exchange of value. A bit of a mouthful, but when you think about raising global economic prosperity, that part of the mission, the entire mission, but that piece specifically really resonated deeply with me, because when you remove friction from money, so friction in the form of costs, delays, opacity, exclusion, you unlock opportunity. So over the years, I've had this incredible privilege of helping shape not just our commercial strategy, but now also our impact strategy in particular. And in that capacity, we've been working with and alongside humanitarian organizations to really modernize how aid moves, which means helping digital dollars get into crisis zones faster, much more transparently, and really importantly, with dignity. So if you consider places like the Ukraine, where we've seen literally firsthand how modern infrastructure, modern financial infrastructure, can move assistance from weeks to minutes. And what makes that beautiful is that in that kind of example, you can see how one of my favorite phrases that I'm happy to say I coined is that our mission is our product and our product is our mission. If your mission is to raise global economic prosperity through the frictionless exchange of value, that Ukrainian example I just gave is a case in point. And that belief is also then what led us to recently announce the Circle Foundation, so that we could really, really lean in a way we hadn't already, where we pledged 1% of our pre-IPO equity to create a foundation that is focused on helping organizations that want to embrace technology to be more effective, and especially embrace technology to be more effective. It's somehow connected to the movement of money. So that starts with a focus on small business growth in the US, which is where the majority of the grant making capacity will go, to organizations that are helping small business growth and which also want to embrace technology to do even more of that. Small businesses are, close to 50% of the US economy, and the further into the global south you get, the higher that percentage goes. So enabling small business is a massive unlock for helping those living on the margins and helping communities that are slightly, less privileged, shall we say. The other piece of the foundation, other grant making capacity, will go to strengthen humanitarian finance globally. But we think we can do so much, and already have done so much, but we know we can do more with our product to help humanitarian finance. That explains that sort of ratio. So the bottom
And I can
line,
imagine 1% of the pre-IPO equity is not a small sum.
it's not a small sum. It's not a small sum because it's equity. It goes up and down in value, and it will be distributed over 10 years, to be clear. So one
Hmm.
tenth of 1% will go into the foundation. 1/10 of 1% of the equity will go into the foundation every year, and then it gets sold. So it depends on the stock price. But yeah, we're quite proud of that commitment. And ultimately, if you add all these things up, whether it's our product, our mission, the foundation, if we can really modernize the rails that move money, which is precisely what we are already doing and what we will do more of, and our ecosystem will do more of over time. And we as Circles support the ecosystems that help entrepreneurs and communities thrive in these various ways, then we can create durable economic resilience. Resilience is really what we're after here. It's one thing to help refugees and those in urgent humanitarian crises. If you can get there before that crisis hits, though, and actually enable resilience so people have, cushion, that is a game changer. So that's why I'm here, because this isn't just about technology for me. It never has been. It's about building financial infrastructure that really gives more people, a real shot at stability, growth, financial resilience, prosperity, and so forth. So, yeah.
Hmm.
But thank you. I love
Well,
that
and
question. It's a great question.
And you talking about economic opportunity and resilience and prosperity really brings me back to how you started, which was I come from an immigrant family, and so many of us who came from immigrant families have those stories kind of embedded in us of the person who came from somewhere else who had just a few dollars in their pocket. Like there's always just a few dollars in their pocket, and the idea that people like that can benefit from a
Totally.
way to reduce friction in their financial life is really compelling. Now, you mentioned stablecoin being frictionless, and I think that's a really important point because it does solve problems for people. But we also know that women disproportionately face barriers like limited smartphone access, digital ID gaps, lower financial literacy, lower digital capability. So, how is Circle thinking about these constraints like today as you also build for the future and
Yeah.
see the promise and potential of this technology?
Totally get it. I mean, look, we've got to be really honest with ourselves. Frictionless technology does definitely does not erase structural inequality. And so, the facts are that women are disproportionately excluded from smartphone ownership, formal identification systems, even just the basics of financial education. So our approach has to be ecosystem based.
Mm.
We partner with NGOs and humanitarian organizations, for example, who really deeply understand these local realities better than anybody. Their communities that they serve are literally right in the sweet spot of what I just described. So, for example, when we do work supporting aid distribution in the Ukraine, that, as I explained earlier, digital dollars are helping deliver funds faster and with dignity. The dignity piece is important because people are not publicly receiving, wads of cash. They're quietly receiving it in a phone. No one knows what's coming into the phone. Nobody even necessarily sees them receiving the money. So dignity is that they're able to do this in the privacy of their own home or their own space. And that's really critical. You can do that with this form of money movement. But in order to enable that, in order to enable digital dollars, you have to have trusted local distribution channels. Trust is a really important word here in this equation, because without trust,
trust.
trust is the ultimate currency. Without trust, it's game over. So everything, you've got to trust that a dollar is worth a dollar is worth a dollar, and this the key sort of stablecoin model. You have to trust that the local distribution channels will work and they will do what they say they're going to do. The refugee or the recipient, the beneficiary at the end, has to trust that what's put in here is actually worth something. So there's that. I think, to something I said earlier, there's crisis response for which this technology is fantastic, but this goes beyond crisis response. In parts of the Middle East, women entrepreneurs are using USDC not just to receive support, but to build income generating businesses, which helps strengthen resilience at the household and community level. So that resilience piece, again, is really critical. Ultimately, that's nirvana to me. Nirvana to me is resilience. It's getting people from subsistence into resilience, and that the majority of the use cases that are supported are resilience because that's what's needed. Right now, we have way too many people living way below the poverty line. When a crisis hits, they have no cushion whatsoever. If we can build resilience, it's a game changer. And I believe that with the technology we have and the ecosystem as a whole, we can do that. So in any event, in certain regions, recipients are going to, cash out through existing networks when they get something like USDC, just to explain like what actually happens when they get this. In others, they use cards that are backed by USDC without needing to understand the underlying infrastructure at all.
And sorry, USDC, like for people who don't know the acronyms, like USDC is
Yes,
digital currency.
US dollar coin. So USDC is a stable coin. And what that means is that it is a digital form of a dollar. And to explain what that can be trusted, to explain what that means is we're only B2B. So in my examples, I'm talking about businesses working with us, but a business has dollars. Let's say it's the UN, and they've got dollars they want to get across borders. So they take their dollars, they convert them to USDC on a one-to-one basis, and I'll explain why it's one-to-one in a second. And now this is digital money. We enable them to convert that money, that fiat normal dollars, into digital money. And because it's natively, truly digital with blockchain technology and cryptography backing it up so that it actually works and it gets from A to B, it is imbued essentially with the superpowers of the internet, which is extraordinary. Because if you think about what WhatsApp enables us to do with with content, you've got content now digitized. WhatsApp enables that content to fly around the world, messaging to fly around the world with the greatest of ease at fractions of a penny, fractions of a second. And no one needs to know how it works. It just does. So imagine, which you don't have to imagine anymore because this is real and it's live now, you have a dollar, any currency that is imbued with, supercharged with the powers of the internet. You now have the ability to send it around the world with the greatest of ease. And you have all these other superpowers that don't exist with normal paper money, such as it's programmable. It is extremely inexpensive, like we're talking about fractions of a penny. It can travel faster. No more T+5, T+7, T+ whatever. It's instant. It's happening same day at much lower cost, et cetera. And the other really important thing, especially for a humanitarian organization or a nonprofit, where dollars are, a scarce resource these days, or funding is a scarce resource, it's trackable and traceable. So you can see the money because of blockchain technology traveling over that digital highway, getting from A to B. So this is a massive unlock. And because it's programmable, you can actually program the money if you wish so that it can, not be used for alcohol and gambling, but only can be used for utilities and food. So that's kind of the general benefit of USDC, but I'll just explain one more thing for the audience, which is that
Mm-hmm.
this notion of a stable coin, the reason it's called a stable coin is because it's stable. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. For every dollar Circle receives, fiat dollar, it goes into a reserve account, and then we issue a digital dollar. And what is in the reserve, which is managed by very large, extremely important organizations, and it is attested to very frequently by Deloitte, so that you can go to our website, you can see how much USDC is sitting in the reserves of fiat money. However much is in there has to match to the amount of digital US dollars, USDC, is out floating around in the world, that is, quote, in circulation. And you can go to our website at any time of the day and you can see exactly how these are matching to each other. And you can see in the reserve account, the cash is only in cash or cash equivalents. And we are so transparent that we even share anything that's in a cash equivalence would be a 3-month treasury bill. We are transparent about that down to those CUSIP numbers. So we don't fool around, because we know, as I said earlier, trust is the ultimate currency. You're not going to believe anything I said about a digital dollar if you don't believe the fundamental model that it's based on, which is a full reserve model, not a fractional reserve model. So with that in mind, you've got this trustworthy digital dollar that's been imbued with the superpowers of the internet, and therefore move around the world as quickly, easily, securely as a WhatsApp message. And that explains why, in a use case like the Ukraine, or in the Middle East, or in Venezuela, or in Argentina, or in other countries that we've helped over the years, or where we've helped communities over the years in those countries, this is tremendously uplifting for them, because that money would not have necessarily been able to get into that country either at all, or certainly a lot less of it would have, or it would have just taken longer, or all of the above.
Yeah, I can see why it would be so important in conflict or post-conflict settings. We had some research we did on Ukrainian women refugees, and we heard story after story about women taking out all of their cash from their bank before they left Ukraine, because they didn't think their money was going to be there for them when they went to another place, which there were some good reasons for them to think that. I mean, Europe was talking about like whether it should guarantee Ukrainian currency. So like those were valid questions. And we heard about women's, like their envelope of cash being stolen by the host family that they were staying with.
Yeah.
The host family saying like, oh, well, you're living here, and so you need to contribute. But like having a secure, safe, like low transaction fee currency that they can keep private seems like it would be really important in conflict and post-conflict settings, which are really unstable.
And I think the point you're making is that technology, this technology has to adapt to the woman, not the other way around. So you've got to build this so that it's trustworthy, so that the technology works, so that they have the funds that they need. And in that regard, we have the ability to fulfill our mission every time we enable these opportunities to move women and other marginalized populations from subsistence to resilience. And that requires these kind of layered solutions of infrastructure. Education's really important, partnerships, policies, another important piece of this. And all of that is wrapped up into we did all of that thinking long before we issued the first digital dollar publicly, because you have to think about that entire ecosystem of and all of that infrastructure that enables something like USDC to exist. We also have a euro-backed coin, same exact model, EURC, just for sake of completion. But yeah.
And now a word from our sponsor. EY applauds Women's World Banking's 45-year legacy empowering women through financial inclusion. Together, we have a common vision to build a better financial services industry, one that is stronger, fairer, and more sustainable. Find out more on EY.com. You mentioned policy and you mentioned you're an ecosystem player. And so I imagine that you were really closely following the launch of the Genius Act in the US. There's also Europe's framework, which is live. I just wonder, from your vantage point, how much have these policy shifts from the past year actually changed the day-to-day reality for women entrepreneurs? And what might still need to happen for regulation to translate into real access and, as you said, trust
Yeah.
at the last mile?
Yeah. So we've been regulatory first forever because we have always recognized that, people who are not in the financial world may not understand this, but regulation enables innovation. When you have regulation, you understand, not only does the company understand what box it is allowed to color in, but the organizations that will rely on the company also then trust it, because regulation is not abstract at all. It's a trust engine. So part of the whole trust mantra that we have been keeping a constant drumbeat of over the years is this is right up there and consistent with what I just said about, explaining how the reserve works and how it's 1-to-1 and why it's called a stable coin and why that dollar is really worth a dollar, that euro is really worth a dollar. Regulation is another piece, really, really critical component of that trust engine. So when when Europe, for example, implements MICA, and the U.S. And Genius Act is signed into law in the U.S., what that signals to everyone, including female entrepreneurs, for example, is that this is safe. This is regulated. You can trust it to be here. It is here to stay. So this is the financial technology you want to embrace and adopt. Especially if you're an entrepreneur, you can skip straight to this stage and not deal with the way money used to move. But regulation enables that. So it's really, really key. Without that regulatory clarity, small businesses are not going to build around this technology, nor will big businesses, frankly. But
Hmm.
at least big businesses have a little cushion. They have a little R&D. They might have an R&D budget. But small businesses, they have limited budgets. They are working their tails off on a daily basis with very
Mm-hmm.
small, capital foundations. So they're simply not going to build around this technology, nor should they, if they don't have the regulatory clarity. So
Mm.
when you have regulation, it unlocks institutional participation. That's what I was referring to with like bigger companies. Bank integration, another key thing. You can't
Mm-hmm.
have an internet financial system without banks participating in this, because you need liquidity, because the money's going, certainly
Right.
today, in and out of fiat money, namely real money and digital money. And you have to have a network of banks and a whole liquidity network, which we have and we continue to build and make increasingly robust. And you also have to have very responsible innovation. So your product development, all of that you work on, has to be done from the perspective of being responsible first. Um, and when you have all that, when you have that regulation and you have that warm embrace, frankly, from regulators around the model that you are have adopted and have lived by for as long as you've been around, which is our case, then it also gives not just small businesses, but fintechs that serve women, NGOs that serve women. It gives them compliance clarity so that they can then operate confidently. So, regulation alone, just like technology doesn't equal access. Regulation alone doesn't equal access, financial access. You got to translate that policy into real inclusion. In order to do that, we need things like, there's certain infrastructure that doesn't exist consistently around the world, such as affordable smartphone access, inclusive digital ID systems, so people aren't losing pieces of paper or they're not being judged based on skin color or gender, but it's a digital ID system.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, education's key piece here. Financial literacy has been important forever, and it still is as important. And that literacy will then in turn builds confidence, which is another important piece of this whole sort of trust landscape, and adoption landscape, and enablement landscape. And then you also need local on and off ramps that work in real world conditions. Particularly in some places, you've got power outages frequently, or the internet may go down. It may be an area prone to environmental stress, and so that might cause some challenges. And so finding ways to enable people to be up and running despite what the environment might be wreaking havoc on, and so forth. So anyway, the bottom line is regulation sort of lays this foundation. It's one of the foundational layers to building the internet financial system that people can trust and that they will use. But true inclusion really requires a holistic ecosystem investment, not just with us, but with others. And so our job now is to really ensure that policy progress turns into practical tools in women's hands. That's what's going to enable the financial resilience I was talking about earlier, and real massive unlocks in a whole host of areas where money moves.
Yeah, and I love what you just said. True inclusion requires like a whole of ecosystem approach. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
I'd love to shift now to talking about outcomes. You talked about resilience. There are other outcomes like economic certainty, business growth,
Yep.
financial health. And the context for this question is actually that this episode is coming out just in time for International Women's Day.
Yep.
So I wondered, like, for women, where do you see the strongest near-term use cases for tokenized cash that could
Mm.
genuinely shift their economic trajectories and not just solve their immediate challenges like transaction costs?
Yeah. I mean, so I think there's a through line here, which is economic certainty, because certainty and confidence changes behavior. Uh, Certainty and confidence allows women to plan, invest, and grow. Those are like the characteristics of resilience, when you can actually plan ahead. Um, and so strong near-term use cases, which sort of can illustrate this, uh, how this can benefit women and other marginalized populations is, I mean, already we're seeing, and we have been seeing for a while now, much lower cost remittances, which means obviously you can put more money into the hands of the women and their households. Much faster cross-border supplier payments for women-led small and medium enterprises. And that's also really important because, again, anywhere money moves, this is relevant. So whether it's remittances and just trying to get money from A to B, or whether it's literally the supply chain and paying, enabling the supplier, the whoever's got the demand, whoever's got the supply, to be able to pay each other, sometimes not even in sort of smaller payment chunks, because again, remember, this is programmable, so you can do that based on certain conditions being met, then a certain amount of money is released, and so on and so forth. Obviously, if it's a stable store of value, there are a lot of inflation-prone economies where that is a huge benefit. And there's other examples of like the Ukrainian example, real-time humanitarian aid that is not only with dignity, as I pointed out earlier, but transparency for the aid organization, because they can track and see exactly where the money is going from A to B to C. And that's really critical for them. So it's certainty and confidence for the aid organization, as well as then for the person who's receiving, the beneficiary of the money. Let's see. Another one that is super near and dear to my heart is access to programmable microcredit and new lending models. The unlock for credit and lending here is going to be huge. I can't tell you exactly what the timeline will be, because it depends on the whole. It's also a whole of ecosystem. It's going to require a whole of ecosystem involvement and leaning in, which they already are, but leaning in. Every day there's sort of incrementally faster and faster development that's happening in this regard with software developers. But if you think about a fundamentally natively digital dollar and data, all these different data, access to data sources that various organizations have, and you layer on top of that AI, for example, it's not too hard to see a future where you can mediate between borrowers and lenders purely digitally with no prejudice. because you won't need to, it won't be relevant to know what the skin color or gender is of the person borrowing the money. And you can get some organizations can get smarter about the characteristics they're looking at for creditworthiness, so that depending on certain things happening, that because a lot of people who are in need of loans or first time business owners, they don't have any money, they don't have any credit history, so it's very hard to
Right.
and this is true all around the world, especially with women. And so the opportunities there are just enormous, and that's something I'm personally very, very passionate about. And we're seeing that there are definitely there are smaller use cases that are evolving already, leveraging USDC in particular for microcredit and these new lending models. So everything I just said, including those, actually are definitely not theoretical use cases. We see them in practice day in, day out. And what that all, and it'll only get, that list will just only grow longer as development advances, and especially I think as AI evolves, because if you have a natively digital asset, which is what USDC is, it was made for AI. And
Hmm.
so the potential there is also crazy. So, but anyway, long story short, when a woman knows that her payment's going to arrive predictably, and in a very timely fashion, perhaps even instantly as far as she's concerned, because it's happening in microseconds, she can plan ahead. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That is not possible in most environments right now. And so, and then when you think about the cost implications, she gets to retain more of every dollar. Her margins therefore can grow. She's she's got that predictability, that trust. She knows it's going to stay as a dollar. Um, Predictability, the ability to plan, that's just foundational to financial resilience. It's by definition, that's what financial resilience means. And so I think the outcomes, the potential outcomes going forward above and beyond what I even just mentioned here are really, frankly, breathtaking.
I love that. And those were such concrete examples for us to take forward of use cases. I could talk to you all day, but I think I have to limit my questions to one more. And that is, like, what specific measurable change should we actually expect women to feel by this time in 2027, given what's happening in the stablecoin space?
Yeah, I think I it's a lot, actually. So, I mean, they're going to see, because we're already seeing this now, payments that are settling in minutes, not days, um, significantly lower remittance and transaction costs, dare I say,
Mm.
uh, at fractions of a penny or less. Because again, we see that in our experiences on a day-to-day basis with our partners. Much greater predictability in cross-border commerce. We already see that, but that's just going to get increasingly so. They'll have, well, because it's digital, they'll have easier access to working capital, per our discussion earlier, and to digital financial tools, whatever those might be. Could be a lending platform, could be just access to their cash, could be financial management, cash management systems. Um, for those that are in need of aid delivery, and for those who provide aid, you get increased transparency, which is massively important, because money literally gets lost, fiat money on the way from A
Hmm.
to B in these aid
Yeah.
situations. Um, those days, those days can be something of the distant past by 2027. Um, I would say more financial services really embedded in the platforms that women are hopefully already using, but maybe would increasingly start to use as they get more confident, also with leveraging their phone and technology platforms to run their business. Um, and as I said earlier, actually, I mean, if we really do our job well, by 2027, women won't need to understand what a stable coin is. They won't even need to know it's USDC behind it. Like, does anyone really understand how this video call works? I mean, maybe some people do, but we don't have to. That's the beauty. It just works. I click, you click, and oh my God, we're talking to each other and we can see each other, which is amazing. So they won't need to understand how the technology works. All they will care about is that it works. I think, I mean, just a few more. They're gonna simply experience money that works, which is maybe kind of a basic point, but because of everything I said before, they can just enjoy that. It's reliable, it's affordable, it's global, and they're connected into the global supply chain. the minute they're connected into um, something like US dollar or euro or other currencies. So, bottom line, the line I like to use is that modern humanitarian finance needs modern infrastructure. I
Mm.
would argue that modern finance in general needs modern infrastructure. And as such, modern women and entrepreneurs, no matter where they are in the world, deserve modern financial tools. If we can really truly move money at internet speed, which we are already doing today, but we can do
Hmm.
it globally, uniformly, globally around the world, then that means you move opportunity at internet speed. Like, I mean, just it's, because money is just underlies everything for the well-being of populations, obviously around the world. And it's a massive contributor. It's not the only one, but it is a massive, significant contributor to raising global prosperity, which is why we have that in our mission statement. So
This was so inspiring. Thank you so much, Elisabeth, for joining us.
absolutely my pleasure. I love these are great questions. I love the questions. Really, it's been my pleasure. Thank you very, very much for inviting me. It's been a privilege.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I have so many notes, and as you know, I like to read off some of my notes to you all, if so that as you're kind of tracking your lessons learned, we can synchronize here. And Elisabeth just closed with saying, if we can move money at internet speed, we can move opportunity at internet speed, and I love that idea. She also talked about true inclusion requiring a whole of ecosystem approach. And that means on ramps and off ramps. That means confidence. That means financial literacy and financial capability. And that means trust in the system. And there's so many things that go into trust. Trust is not just between the individual and the institution, but it's bolstered by the regulatory environment. Trust might be built by hearing about your neighbors, hearing about your community, using a financial service, using stablecoin perhaps. And we think about that trust as an ecosystem play. She also talked about a lot of use cases that I've written down. We talked about Ukraine at the beginning. We also talked about women entrepreneurs who are scrappy and trying to reduce their costs and increase their profit margins. And this is a great answer to them. And we talked about the importance of payments being private and secure. Importance of payments being accessible as well. Uh, and there at the end, I loved that she said, hopefully by this time next year, people won't need to understand what stablecoin is. So maybe next year when we have these conversations, we don't have to explain USDC, which actually I did not know. Turns out I didn't know what the acronym meant. I thought it was US digital currency, but it's US dollarized. I'm gonna go back to it. And maybe you can rewind back to that part if you want to know what that acronym is. But hopefully as we move forward, it'll be as easy as jumping on a video call where you don't understand all the technology, but you just know how to use it. And I think that was a really important point as well. At Women's World Banking, we just published a report with Franklin Templeton that looks at the role of new technology in driving inclusion, and specifically looking at crypto and AI. Now, I'm going to link to it in the description of the YouTube video, but you can also find it on the Institute page on our website. And if you found today's discussion valuable, please don't forget to subscribe, to rate, to share it with your friends and colleagues, to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, to send it to your mom, whatever. Your feedback matters, and it helps us bring you the content that resonates. So please stay engaged, stay informed. Have a wonderful International Women's Day this year, March 2026, and we'll see you next time.